I don't play that fact. Once you let me go, no, you never come back. I'ma be the best that you never had. I'ma kick back when you fake like that. Head out of the game, I don't play that fact. Once you let me go, no, you never come back. I'ma be the best that you never had. I'ma kick, 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 I'ma be the best that you never had. Rumba pa pa, rumba pa pa, see I got it. Rumba pa pa, rumba pa pa, do you want it? I don't flex, I'm success. Effortless, I'm like a rumba pa pa, rumba pa pa, see I got it. I don't flex, I'm success. 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 Effortless, see ya. I'ma kick, 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 I'ma be the best that you never had. Rumba pa pa, rumba pa pa, see I got it. Rumba pa pa, rumba pa pa, do you want it? I don't flex, I'm success. Effortless, I'm like a rumba pa pa, rumba pa pa, see I got it. Rumba pa pa, rumba pa pa, see I got it. Rumba pa pa, rumba pa pa, do you want it? I don't flex, I'm success. Effortless, I'm like a rumba pa pa, rumba pa pa, see I got it. Rumba pa pa, rumba pa pa, see I got it. Rumba pa pa, rumba pa pa, do you want it? Want it, want it, want it, want it.
I don't think I've ever been more nervous, more anxious, more scared to address the topic of my life. I gotta tell you, I've been doing these lives for almost 4 months now. I've gotten totally past the nerves. I usually feel very loose, but this one is, it's hard. It's hard to talk about. You know, last summer when Chris Bouchard made headlines for saying that Toronto is a strange place for African Americans, I think a lot of people were very upset with him for saying that it was a very dated take. Um, and I was against it. I was against him saying that. And, you know, a lot of people rallied against it. Vince Carter came out in support for Toronto. But over the last couple of weeks, I've had to reevaluate just what this city and, of course, the NBA in general. I don't want to throw Canada under the bus. Definitely, you know, not the biggest problem in the NBA by any means. But obviously, a lot of the examples that we're going to look at are Raptor specific. And, you know, there's a particular video that I watched this morning that really just sparked this need to make this video. It's been something that's been bubbling under the surface for me for months. If you've been watching these lives, you know that I've addressed it for 10 minutes at the end of the live here, 5 minutes at the end of the live here. The DeJounte Murray, All the Smoke interview definitely caught my attention. What happened with DR DeRozan certainly sparked something inside of me that was just, it made me very upset. Of course, the Scotty Barnes, you know, doesn't work hard enough stuff. The Chris Boucher, the tweets and DMs that he's received have really just frustrated me. And I was embarrassed to be a Raptor fan when I saw the change.org thing in the bubble about Pascal Siakam. But, you know, when I came to Canada, I came here from the States, and of course, racism is very open in the States. I'll be honest, like, depending on what state you're in, if you're in Texas, I've been called some pretty nasty things in Texas, from sand enner to, around 2001 when we went back to the States after 9/11, if you had a tan in the summer and you look like me, oh my God, like the stuff that people would say to you. I remember being in the airport and I got harassed by this woman, and she would just follow me around, and she kept following me around, and I got so mad at her. And the problem is when you react to this stuff, you just look so much worse. And there I am, at 15, and she's like, check his bag, check his bag, check his bag. And I'm like, I'm trying to hold back tears as I'm like, yo, what are you saying to me? It's like when people see that you're born in Yugoslavia, right? And Yugoslavia had this like really nasty reputation in the 90s because of the war and because of CNN's very biased coverage of Serbian people in general. Just saying you were Serb to someone evoked all of the sense of you're violent and you're backwards and you're all these things. I've watched a lot of people in my life that mattered a great deal to me endure reckless comments, and they grew thick skin. They grew really thick skin, and I would just listen to them endure this bullshit, and it would make me upset and it would make me angry. So I just want to talk about it. I want to talk about it as a person who was a really big fan of the Portland Trailblazers. I want to talk about it as a person who was a really big fan of Allen Iverson. And I want to talk about it as someone who's a really big fan of Scotty Barnes. In 2004, we openly used to talk about the puckhead media. And we used to talk about the suburbers or the suburbanites in Toronto. When we moved to Toronto, there was a genuine sense from my family and for a lot of us that we had moved to a very tolerant, multicultural place where some of the racism that we saw, in places like Alabama, Louisiana, Mississippi, it just didn't exist over here. But to be honest, there is no place in North America where this does not exist. And the internet has just become this megaphone. And sometimes it's overt and it is very obvious. And sometimes it's subtextual and it's in words. I'm not going to duck this. There is a YouTuber out there, due to me, being very critical of Pascal Siakam this year, who accused me of being racist towards Pascal Siakam. People ran with it. People to this very day say that, that's the reason that I was critical of Pascal Siakam. Of course, they're going to ignore the fact that I've been very complimentary of Christian Coloco. They're going to ignore the fact that Scotty and, OG are my favorite players on the team. They'll ignore everything that doesn't agree with that narrative. Once it's out there, it's out there. So I'm also aware of the dangers of accusing somebody of being racist when they are not racist. I am also very blissfully aware that as someone who looks like me, I may not be the prototypical person to address the subject. And I invite anybody who may be more of a prototypical person to address the subject, or who has greater deal of insight into this, to please call and address this. If you have something to say, the lines are open. Sometimes it's in the words. The documentary that I watched this morning was by a new channel that is doing incredible work. I think it's called Underdog something, and they did a documentary with the Trailblazers. It's called the Trailblazers documentary, and they sat down with Rasheed Wallace and Bonzi Wallace to talk about their time in Portland, and it was eye-opening. Marijuana is legal in Toronto. It's legal in a lot of states now, but it's interesting to look back retrospectively, and look at how much we chastised as a society people who smoked weed. The double standard, of course, is not lost on me. Bill Walton was a notorious pothead. He smoked a lot of weed, did a lot of acid, did a lot of shrooms. Okay? Bill Walton was the hippie child. People loved him. He was also a Portland area legend. Bill Walton then spent years chastising, ridiculing the Portland Trailblazers as the Portland Jailblazers. Now, if you do not do any research on this team, which of course was one of my favorite teams, I rooted for them every single year to make the finals, and they didn't, and they got stopped by Shaq and Kobe. But I love that team. I love Rasheed Wallace, and I always supported Rasheed Wallace. He was my favorite player for years in the NBA, and part of it was he was going against something that I believed. Okay, I'm gonna apologize in advance. I need to take a second. I apologize. Just give me 1 second. I'll be right back in 1 sec. My apologies. So, one of the reasons that I really appreciated Rasheed was that he was addressing a sick culture. He would call it out. He didn't really have a filter about it. So, if you didn't do any research into the Portland Jailblazers, you would assume that they just got in trouble a lot with the law. You would assume that these dudes went to jail. You would assume that Bonzi Wells was an ex-con. You would assume that Portland, was just this. And look, the elephant in the room. None of these guys went to jail. The only guy who had any serious charges laid against him was Ruben Patterson. And I don't think you think of Ruben Patterson when you think of the Portland Trailblazers. I think most people think of Rasheed Wallace screaming at referees. I think most people think of Damon Stoudemire, and what could have been had he not smoked so much weed or whatever. I mean, he's a great coach. He's a great human being. And I think most people think of guys like Scottie Pippen, Brian Grant with his dreads. I have struggled my entire life to understand what exactly puts a racist idea in someone's head. What is racism? Here's my definition. You certainly can have your own, but my definition is anything where the color of somebody's skin or where they come from, or even culturally speaking, how they speak and act, drastically shapes your perception of them. So the example, of course, of Bill Walton versus Rasheed Wallace. Rasheed Wallace smoked weed. He was open about it. What I appreciated about him was when he was approached to do a PSA about not doing drugs by the Portland Trailblazers PR department that was drastically struggling to attract a white audience to support this team, he refused on the grounds that it would be hypocritical. And that's why I loved Rasheed Wallace. And honestly, that's why I love Scottie Barnes, because there is a sincerity to them. There is a consistency. They're not sellouts. They're not people who walk one line in private and walk another line in public. They are consistent people. And that's what I appreciate about both of them. And that's what I appreciated about Ron Artest and why I loved him so much. It's what I appreciate about Arvydas Sabonis. These people look nothing alike. None of them are, from the same part of the world. But they are all different in that way, but they are all united in the fact that they were just very direct. I like direct people. It's not lost on me that Bill Walton, once Rasheed Wallace came to be aware of Bill Walton's, past with pot and all this stuff, he approached him and he said, "Listen, you're a hypocrite. If you keep talking about us on air, calling us the Trailblazers, I'm going to start talking about you." Guess what? It stopped. It stopped right there. Because sometimes you let things go and they keep going, but you call them out and they stop. That's what this video is about. It's about calling it out. So this dude right here, often considered an OG, often considered a pioneer, a beat grunt who wanted to cover hockey but took the dastardly, inconvenient, terrible job of having to cover this random expansion Raptors team. This guy. He deleted that tweet. I will make sure for the rest of my life that that tweet becomes infamous, because that tweet is what's wrong with the NBA. When I say racism, here's what I mean. When Bill Laimbeer commits a hard foul and you call him an enforcer, and Rasheed Wallace commits a hard foul and you call him a thug, that's racism right there. Because you have allowed the color of these two men's skin to dictate what you are actually, what you're calling out. Okay, we have a caller here. I do have Chris, hang tight for 2 minutes. I'm just gonna try to buzz through some of the things that I want to talk about here, and we'll definitely let you on, man. Parlay bets. This broke my heart in a million different ways. Uh, t- it broke my heart so much that I didn't want to repeat it, but if you need to hear it, someone messaged Chris Boucher after he scored 5 points when they needed him to score 10 points to satisfy their parlay, and they said, "I chose the wrong slave." They didn't send this in 1962. They didn't send this in 1942. They sent this in 2023. How do you do that, man? How do you say that to somebody? I don't care how much money you lost. How do you say that to somebody? How do you go on the internet and say this shit about someone, man? Who knew a hood rat with cornrows would be a horrible parent? I, for one, am shocked. Bro, the shit that some NBA athletes had to go through to make it to this point. The shit that Kawhi Leonard had to go through, man. He played a game after his father was shot. And you never grew up in Compton. You don't know what DeMar DeRozan went through to make it to the league, to make it to USC, to get a Division I scholarship. Are you crazy? And he's a great parent. And because his daughter cheered for him, and some idiot fans, presumably in this fan base, decided to text some online threats directed at his 9-year-old daughter. This girl, who grew up in this arena, man. I remember pictures of her. I remember the day she was born. And you had some grown-ass people. And I don't want to hear that they were 10 years old. No, they were not. They were adults. And I've seen these adults. It's twisted, man. This is ridiculous. That someone decided that it was okay to go online and suggest that a guy who went from Cameroon, left his home, went all the way to New Mexico State, worked as hard as he could, has worked damn hard, honestly outperformed probably the greatest 27th pick of all time, and he didn't get there by accident. That was all hard work. It's all sweat equity. He works hard every single year. Let's address the elephant in the room. You're poor, they're not. That's really it, right? You're jealous. That's what this is. You're upset that you make $18 an hour working at Walmart. These guys get paid $28 million, $30 million, and they don't satisfy your parlay, so you're upset. That's what it is. And they're black. Yes, a lot of NBA athletes are black, and a lot of NBA fans are white. We're gonna have to get along at some point. We had a caller on here, I will never forget him, who called Scotty Barnes unintellectual. And he's an old white man, of course. and I had to like, and I had to tell you, I wish you know you had a full body cam because my fists were gritting. You don't want to believe that African American athletes don't want to play in this city or in Portland or in Indiana or in certain markets because they just don't like the cold. No, man, it's because it doesn't feel like home. It doesn't feel like home. So, my message to you, if you are a fan out there, is to look inside. And before you get on the internet and you start getting angry at someone for not meeting your parlay bad or missing too many shots or whatever, just try to understand where it's coming from and how frustrated you would be if that player looked more like you. Because I will tell you right now that the way that ESPN covered this incident, Malice in the Palace, which started with a white fan throwing a beer at a black man who was just trying to take a timeout. Ron Artest was just trying to breathe on the scorer's table after a hard foul from Ben Wallace. And he was just trying to breathe, man. And he had a beer come at him. And I'm gonna tell you something, like, as someone who's gone through a lot of trauma in my life, you don't understand trauma triggers, man. I'm telling you. If you got beat, if you lived in hostile environments, you don't know how that's gonna set you off. And when you are a white media member and you say, well, I would have acted differently, well, you grew up different. You grew up different. Your triggers are different. Your understanding of life was different. Yo, I remember a documentary I watched in the 90s where someone talked about growing up in Cabrini Green, and this is a Chicago project. And I mean, I grew up in a lot of projects. I didn't grow up in Cabrini Green, but I can tell you definitely that I felt some of this when I was growing up. And they said that he was an ex-soldier, right? And he had returned from war. I believe it was Vietnam. And he said that walking through Cabrini Green felt a lot like walking through Vietnam. That there was a feeling of consistent danger. And when you live that way, when that's your whole life, when you don't know when you're going to get run up on, you don't know when you're going to get shot, you don't know when a stray is going to come through a window, when you don't know if something's going to go through the ceiling and kill your baby, when you don't know that, when you don't know that, you grow up different. You feel different. Now, obviously, I'm not saying that John Morant had a right to, flash a gun on Instagram, or that people don't have a right to be upset with him. But address it fairly. Understand where he's coming from. It's not saying you can't criticize anything. I'm just saying be fair about it. So, do I think that if Scotty Barnes talked a little bit different, looked a little bit different, that Doug Smith would not be saying this about him? Yes, I do. Because when people show you who they are, believe them. All right. I'm going to let Chris on here, man. Chris, what's going on, man?
Hey Rob, can you hear me?
I can. What's up?
So first, are you Serbian Orthodox?
Mm-hmm.
So you're celebrating Easter today
Yeah.
or tomorrow? Okay, happy Easter.
Thank you.
So Rob, I'll tell you straight up, I love Pensari basketball. I've been watching you for the past year,
Mm-hmm.
and you know, try not to give too much detail, but I work in healthcare, and sometimes you see a shortcoming in treatment of patients, and the most egregious thing I ever saw was a lady. She came into the emergency department. She was confused, and the emergency doctor said, "Oh, she's confused because she's like mentally unstable." They ended up missing a brain infection. This lady ended up dying. Okay, she was a white lady who lived on a farm, and they said that she was cognitively impaired because she lived a simple life.
Mm-hmm.
So you sort of see this prejudice across, multiple spheres, whether it be education, whether it be race, so on and so forth. And I find the issue is whenever a bad outcome happens to someone who is white, we'll just say, oh, this was a bad outcome, whatever. Like this lady, the prejudice was the fact that she was a farmer. But had she been black, it would have been the fact that she was a black farmer. And so, yes, you're right to a certain extent. There's this indolent racism that sort of exists. You're never going to get rid of it. But to say that it's huge and it's negatively impacting everything, I think is an overstatement. And the other thing I'll say too is, my threshold. So I'm also like a visible minority, I'll say. And I'd say the threshold to blame things on race is too low. So I got pulled over by a cop when I was 18. My dad is a first generation immigrant. Got pulled over by a cop, and the cop gave me a ticket. He was pretty rough about it. I get home, and my dad's like, "Oh, was the cop white?" I said, "Yeah, the cop was white." He said, "Oh, he's racist." I'm like, "Well, no, I broke the law." So I'm just saying there's a middle ground here, right?
I get what you're saying. I get what you're saying. Okay. I myself dressed a certain way when I was 13, 14 years old, and I had constant run-ins with cops. Okay. I also broke the law a couple of times, more than a couple of times. I'm not going to cap here. A lot of times when I was a teenager, and I also got in trouble with a cop. When I was in high school, I punched a cop, and somehow got away with it. That's the miraculous part about this. I swung at a cop and got away with it because he grabbed me. He grabbed me by my shoulder, and thank God for me, it was on camera. He grabbed me on my shoulder. Why? Why did he grab me by my shoulder? Because I had an airbrushed gun on my shirt, and I wasn't allowed to wear one, and he thought that it was a gang symbol. So you may say, well, you, Rob, Mr. Serbian, you're not black, you're not brown, you're not Asian. You don't have a right to say that was racist, right? Well, the way I dress should not be a means to change like who I am, right? Because the minute I changed my clothes and started wearing like fitted polos, I never saw another cop again. They started nodding at me. How are you, sir? How you doing, sir? So what's the message here? I can look like me, but I have to dress like them, right?
So I think the issue, Rob, is that this is largely anecdotes, and you can use anecdotes from. I'll give you a very good example. Okay, so after Black Lives Matter happened, right, there was the big protest in 2020. You sort of started seeing a media bias where they wouldn't report on black on white crimes.
Okay. I'm not. We're not going into this. I understand. I get what you're saying. I get what you're saying.
Fine. So I'll make this point. Okay. Most things are anecdotes. I would say 95% plus of people are well-intentioned, good people.
I don't think so. I don't think it's 95%.
Of course it is. Otherwise, society wouldn't function, right? So if you had,
sorry. Do you think that Germany during World War II functioned? Because it functioned beautifully.
Rob, do you want to talk about history? I'm very well informed. So, at the end of the day, there's such thing as propaganda.
Am I not well informed about history?
No, but you're bringing up things that if you knew better, you wouldn't be saying what you're saying, right? There's such thing as propaganda, there's such thing as fear. So we want to make it sound like the vast majority.
How do you think the conflict in Yugoslavia started? Do you know? You know about history, right?
Sorry, you wanted to talk about Germany, so I'm talking to you about Germany. So I'm telling you explicitly, and you know this. A lot of this is Nazi propaganda, and a lot of it is actually being feared into silence for threats of death. So do you want to say that 95% of German people were evil and they wanted to be prejudiced against Jews? Probably not. Probably what it was is they were scared into silence.
This is you're moving the goalpost here.
I'm not moving the goalpost.
No, you are.
You brought up Germany, Rob. You brought up Germany.
Hold on, Chris. Hold on. You're not going to talk over me, okay?
I'm not talking over you.
You are.
You're the one who brought up Germany. I'm answering you with the example.
No. Hold on, buddy. If you keep talking over me, I'm going to end this call. Okay, so I'm going to ask you to be respectful. I'm giving you a platform, even though I definitely know where you're going, and I don't love it. Dude, chill. Okay, we can have this conversation respectfully, or we cannot have this conversation.
Rob, I love you, man. I watch your show all the time, and I'm telling you, I think you're perceiving me as being like argumentative. I'm not, but I think your message is well intentioned. I actually think it's wrong, right? You're convincing people that there's this vast mass of people that are out there.
I don't have to convince people. People know this. Look, you can talk about it as on the it's on the fringes. You can say, okay, okay, so let's say, for instance, that you're right. Let's say it's only 5% of people that really have a problem with DeMar DeRozan having cornrows, and let's say it's 5% of people that have an issue with the way Scotty Barnes talks. Consider the demographics of Toronto. You don't think 5% is a pretty sizable amount of people?
You're the one who was refuting the 5%, Rob. So I don't know what you're
Dude,
getting at
on the
with it.
one hand, you want to say that 5% of people are the problem and it's not more than that. On the other hand, you're saying that, oh, 95% of Germans were not the problem. So do you understand the difference between 5% and 95%? Because it's literally like 19 times the amount, right? Like that's why I said you moved the goalpost, right? You didn't say, "Oh, do you think 6% of Germans had a problem with Jews?" You said, "Do we think 95% of Germans had a problem with Jews?" Do you see? In that case, you use 95% in your favor. Now, in this case, you use 95% in your favor again, and it's completely flipped. Look, I am not look, it always comes down to fear. It always comes down to fear. You want to talk about cops, you want to talk about police shootings, you want to talk about Black Lives Matter. It always comes down to fear. My problem is, if I'm black and you're afraid of black people, I can't do anything about that. So you can say you were afraid of me, but that doesn't change. We always want to bring up, oh, well, more white people get shot by cops every single year than black people. That is a fact, right? There's also more white people in America than black people. Do we want to forget about that?
So, Rob, if you want to talk about percentages, right, because percentages are more reliable, I don't understand why you're frustrated. Like, I listen to you. I'm not making faces. I'm not scoffing at you. And you're asking me.
I don't even see your camera, so I don't know if you're making faces.
Because I work in healthcare, I'd rather not.
No, that's fine. I'm not asking you to turn on your camera.
So anyways, Rob, listen, man. Like, I'm telling you, like,
what is your point? Can you get to the point, please?
My point
you think
is,
your point is that you think I'm overblowing this, that I'm overrepresenting it.
100%. But more importantly. So, Rob, I'm gonna say this, and then I'll let you go because you're visibly upset with me or frustrated. I'll put it for you this way. So, in the case of my dad, I'll come back to me. That way, it's nothing that will trigger anything. So, my dad tells me, "Oh, you were pulled over because it was a white cop and you're a visible minority." Okay, that's what he told me that day.
Mm-hmm.
So, your conduct can go one of two ways. I can tell myself, oh yeah, my dad's right. So F the police. Next time a cop tries to pull me over, I'll try to escape from them, which will, as you know, result in more harm. Or alternatively, I had the choice to say, okay, maybe I'll just drive speed limit next time and I won't get pulled over. So the problem with your message, Rob, is you're convincing people, and yes, and you're right, there's some explicit racism, but what I'm saying is it's not this massive systemic issue. And the problem is with blaming the system all the time.
You don't think that racism is a massive systemic issue? Do you see?
Of course it's not. Of course it's not. There's such thing as race hustling, man. Like,
are you? No. Listen, I'm not some leftist, propagandist. Okay, I'm.
Of course you are, Rob. This is like.
Excuse me. Hold on. I am. You're gonna tell me how I voted every single year? Are you crazy?
You don't. It doesn't matter what you vote for. What you're spewing is actually factually incorrect.
What I'm spewing?
Rob,
the word spewing is loaded. You know that, right? You know that has a meaning. Spewing.
Sure. So fine. So tell me how you believe in this systemic issue, and I'll refute it for you if you'd like. With facts, if you like.
With facts.
Yes.
Okay? Do you know who Ron DeSantis is?
Yes.
Do you know who Donald Trump is?
Yes.
Do you understand that these two men represent a very sizable portion of the American population's voting preferences right now?
Okay, you're not using facts. You're just using ad hominem attacks. So tell me what you're trying to say. This is what I'm saying.
This is not an ad hominem attack.
You're just mentioning names as if that's supposed to mean something. Tell me what you're trying to convey. Tell me what you're trying to convey.
Over half the country voted for Donald Trump.
Okay, now tell me.
You're telling me that there isn't a systemic issue here?
Tell me why it's an issue. And the reason why I'm saying that is, Rob, maybe someone voted for Donald Trump because they didn't like the alternative. Maybe for them it was a worse alternative. So you have to actually tell me why it's an issue.
I am not someone who supports the Democratic Party. I have a lot of bad things to say about Hillary Clinton. You're not gonna pigeonhole me into a fucking box, buddy. You're not talking to someone who's been indoctrinated by the left. You are talking to someone who's been very center pretty much his whole life politically.
Rob, what I'm asking you, it's an invitation for you to tell me why is it wrong to vote for Donald Trump? Why is it wrong to vote for Ron DeSantis? And I
Why
know
is
you
it
have reasons. I want you to say it explicitly.
why is it wrong to vote for Donald Trump?
Yes, say it. Say it and give facts.
You need facts for why it is wrong
You
to
can say it
vote for.
rhetorically. You can say it rhetorically, but you should actually just say the reasons. So I could tell you why I wouldn't vote for Joe Biden, for instance, or Hillary Clinton, or Donald Trump. And I can actually articulate the reasons. So articulate. Right? So for instance, Joe Biden was the one who signed the crime bill in the 1990s that led to mass incarceration of
Oh
blacks.
my God, dude,
He
this is
also said
this is
he
honestly the
also said
problem when you listen to InfoWars all day.
it's not InfoWars. This is actually fact, and you just keep saying,
You
"Oh,
keep saying it's fact, and then you try to say the systemic racism is not a problem, bro. You are repeating
Rob,
all of Jason Whitlock's talking points, and
I
you're acting like I don't listen to that. I have heard both sides, bro. When do you know that I sat in 2016 I sat in a election watch party with 382 people, and 381 of them believed that Hillary Clinton was going to win that election. Do you know the one person who believed that she was not going to win that election was me? And I sat there and I said, I told you so, I told you so, I told you so. And do you know why I told you so? Because I actually took the time to reach out to people that I believed were voting for Donald Trump. And I listened to them, and I heard them out, and I heard why they were so frustrated, because they didn't have jobs. But you know what the problem is? When you get frustrated, you lean into an opposite extreme. You know, people who lean into Andrew Tate, they don't agree with all of his takes, but he's mad at the same people that they're mad at. Ron DeSantis, he might be a blithering idiot, but he's mad at the same people that you're mad at. Leftists, wokeists. He's mad at the woke mob. So let's support this guy who's mad at the same people that we are, and we'll be intellectual and we'll spew facts. I don't think you understand who you're talking to. I know you want to pigeonhole me into the left. I know you want to pigeonhole me as someone who's just been brainwashed by propaganda, but you're not going to. If you wanted to come on here and actually have a real conversation about the things that I'm talking about, not the broad brush, well, you're making it a bigger issue than it is. These things happened, okay? We don't talk, look, every single crime needs to be addressed at the surface. No, if somebody murdered your family and you were like, hey, someone murdered my family, be like, yo, man, you're making murder a bigger deal than it has to be. It barely ever happens, which would be true, but it happened. So somebody messaged Chris Boucher, unless you're going to call Chris Boucher a liar. Somebody started a petition saying send Pascal back to Africa. That happened, unless you're saying it didn't happen and I'm imagining things and I'm inventing screenshots. Doug Smith called Dwight Howard a thug, a very loaded term that was used consistently throughout the early 2000s. If you don't think that race plays a part in basketball and in pro sports, you are out to lunch. You are as lost in the weeds as the people that you are angry at, my friend. And I appreciate where you're coming from, where you don't want to let the whole world is racist, paradigm rule your life. And I appreciate that. And I understand that the whole world is not racist. And there are a lot of people who are just ignorant. And I don't believe that the whole world is racist. I don't. I believe there are a lot of well-intentioned white people out there who genuinely have no hate in their hearts towards people. But to be completely fair, if you don't think that race has played a massive part in education systems, in how various, but bro, where do you even come from? Did you live in Washington Heights? I watched racism literally in my neighborhood. I watched us call the cops and let the cops come 78 minutes after a crime happened in our neighborhood. And in the same time, like, if my aunt, who lived in a really well-to-do part of New York, called the cops would be there in 1 minute. Why do you think that disparity exists? Oh, it's a lack of financing, right? It's not. Okay, so yeah.
Rob, listen, man. Like I said, I'm actually a huge fan. I watch you literally almost.
You keep saying that, but that's deflecting the issue. I don't care if you like my basketball takes. It doesn't matter. I appreciate it, but I am asking you to stop manipulating the subject.
No, on the contrary. Rob, can you stop talking over me? Like, you asked me for respect. I let you go on your tangent.
Dude, I'm asking you to stop being toxic, okay? You keep telling me that you appreciate my basketball takes, and I'm asking you to talk about what I'm talking about.
When you watch this again later, you're going to see that only one of us was talking over the other. Only one of us was yelling. And, like, quite frankly, I'm just trying to have a conversation with you. And the reason why I'm telling you I like your takes is not to deflect. It's actually to tell you I like you as a person, but I disagree with you. Because I feel like you're taking this personally.
But I don't care if you like me as a person. I appreciate that you watch the channel, but that has nothing to do with what I'm talking about. Do you understand that? Has nothing to do.
So Rob,
So
fine.
do you have
I'll
an
just say
issue with
this.
what someone said to Chris Boucher? Can we just start there? Do you have an issue with someone? What someone?
Of course. Okay, so
Great.
I'll just conclude and I'll log off because I don't think this is going anywhere. This is all I'm
Sure.
going to say. For every douchebag like Doug Smith, for every douchebag like the dude who started the petition for Pascal Siakam, for every douchebag that said what he said to Chris Boucher, there are hundreds, if not thousands, of people that love those athletes. That there's thousands of people that like Chris Boucher, like Pascal Siakam, and so on. And so, yes, does racism exist? Yes, it's endemic. It'll never go away. But we have come a very, very long way, a very, very far way, as I'm sure you can appreciate. And eventually, just by virtue of forcing ourselves to get along together, things will naturally get better.
Chris, I
That
want to ask you a really serious question. Okay? And
sure.
please try to answer it with a yes or no if you can. I appreciate if you need to expand. Of all the people that you think love Chris Boucher so much, cheer for him, wear his 25 jersey, of all those people, if those people represented a pie and that pie was 100, what percentage of that pie do you think would be okay if their daughter married Chris Boucher?
That's a yes/no question.
No, actually, give me a percentage. What percentage of those people that you think love Chris Boucher, let's assume they're all white in this case, or Indian, or Chinese. I'm not saying that white people are the only people that are racist. There are a lot of racism in all other in all the other cultures. What percentage of Indian people, Muslim people, Asian people, white people do you think would be okay if their daughter came home tomorrow and said, "Hey, I'm not marrying that banker that you want me to marry. I'm not marrying that white boy from Oakville that you want me to marry. I want to marry this basketball player, Chris Boucher." What percentage of parents do you think would be genuinely okay? Not, oh, we better be okay because we're going to look like racists, but genuinely, like they would have no reaction in their heart of, oh no, our grandchild is going to be half black. Tell me what percentage of people you think would be genuinely okay, not even okay, happy, because you should be happy. Your daughter's marrying someone that she loves, and he's a fucking basketball player and he makes a lot of money. You should be happy about that. So tell me what percentage of people you genuinely believe, and I think this will completely clarify where you and I are on this, because I will let you know my answer.
Sure. I don't want you to interrupt me.
Sure, go
I
ahead.
will answer your question. Perfect. So this is the difference between me and you, Rob, and this should clarify where you stand. So the reason you're asking this question, I presume, is because Chris Boucher is black. Is that correct?
Yes.
That's why you're talking about white people. Okay. So here's the
I
difference
didn't just say
between
white
you.
people. I didn't just say white people.
You literally
Don't
said
miss.
out of no, you said out of 100 white people, and then you
I
added the Muslim and the Indian. But you
no,
said
I just said okay. Let's just say
regardless.
non-black people.
Sure.
So everyone else non-black.
So here's the point I'm going to get at. Here's the point I'm going to get at. You reduced Chris Boucher to this black basketball player. That was the point of what you're getting at, right? And that you talked about different cultures and white people and so on. Is that clear? I just need to reframe it so I can answer.
I'm not reducing him to a black player. I'm not
Okay,
because he's
but
a lot of
that was
things.
the
He's a
point.
Montrealer. He's
Exactly.
he's a basketball player. He's a lot of these things.
Exactly.
No,
Exactly.
but I am
What I'm
saying
getting at,
based.
Rob, what I'm getting at is you cannot answer that question. If I'm a father, my first question is not going to be how much does the guy make? What color is his skin? I want to know. Is he well intentioned towards you? Does he love you? Does he come from a good family?
Fine. Assume
So,
all of those things are true. That he loves you. That he's well
but Rob,
intentioned. That he comes from a
so,
good family.
so that's the thing. Me and you are different because this. You want to see how it's going to show where we are. You reduced him to a black basketball player. And I'm telling you, none of that shit should matter. I can't speak for other people. I can't speak for other people. What I can say is this reductionist mentality that you clearly have is why there's so many issues. You've reduced him to the point you were trying to get at is he's a black basketball player.
No, you are man, you are out to lunch if you think
Rob,
I'm gonna let you misrepresent what I just said. Buddy,
that's what
I
you
am
did. And I reframed it for you 3 times just to expose to you this mentality of reducing people to race or to gender.
I am not reducing him to race. I am telling you that
All right,
based on that one variable, based on that one variable, do you think that they would be okay? Everything else is static. He's a good guy. He's hardworking. He's a basketball player, all that stuff. Some people might have an issue with the fact that he's an athlete, and athletes have a bit of a reputation of cheating around. Some people may have an issue with the fact that, I don't know, he's too old, too young. I don't know. But I'm saying if all things that they would want, like let's just say there's a white Chris Boucher and a black Chris Boucher, okay? And everything else is consistent. They're both basketball players. Or they're both in a vocation that you respect. They both make good money. They're both hardworking. They both love your daughter. But one of them looks like Chris Boucher and the other one looks like Grayson Allen. Do like I mean, dude, I have friends who literally their parents were like, if you come home and you're dating a black guy, I'm gonna bury you in the backyard. Like you're telling me that this doesn't exist? You're acting like it's on the fringes,
No,
bro.
of
It
course it
exists.
exists. Of course it
And
exists.
this and the point of this is to bring it out into the open, because there's a lot
Yes.
of quiet
Yes.
racism. Like some of this shit is
Well,
loud. Like this shit online is loud. I'm talking about the quiet stuff. The quiet stuff that people whisper in their car ride at home. Okay?
yeah.
And that's
So
the stuff that when people get angry, when people get desperate, when people get frustrated with their jobs, with their parlays, that's the shit that spews out online. And we've never had access to what people really thought about the Malice in the Palace because we didn't have Twitter back then. Barely had social media. There was MySpace. But imagine if Malice in the Palace, in that current, political climate that we were in 2004, happened today. The vitriol that would spill over on Twitter, right? So Twitter is giving a voice to a lot of people. If you think that thug is not a loaded term, peace be to you. Okay. If you think that someone messaging, like, I'm not saying that you don't have a problem with that. I'm just saying that you are reducing this to, this is a very small problem, right? Yeah, it's not a problem we need to address. Why are you having a live about this, Rob? And I'm telling you, it's a big problem because it's literally been addressed by 4 different people in this organization in the span of 2 years. Okay. So anyway, Chris, I appreciate it. Look, I'm not trying to be hostile. I understand this is a very sensitive subject. I'm not trying to be like angry. I'm not trying like whatever. And you're probably right. I'm going to look back on this and be like, why didn't I let him talk more? But some of the stuff that you're saying, man, like you're echoing talking points of people that I do not respect. And believe me, I know where you're getting your information from too. That's the
so
problem.
so Rob, listen, man. Like I said, you're great. Don't make assumptions about where I get anything from. This is the difference. I don't make assumptions about you, and I know more about you than you know about me because I watch you all the time. I'm still not making assumptions. And all I'm asking from you is you make a lot of suppositions here that are largely unfounded. And yes, you know what? Like coming from a minority background, I can tell you, like my parents want me to marry someone from my same minority background. That exists. You're 100% correct. But what I'm saying is my same parents, so the person I'm engaged to, is from a different ethnic background than me. And yes, they were like, oh, she's not the same as you. But they got over it because
So
she's
that's
a
not
lovely person.
racist. That's not racist.
So
To
Rob,
to judge a person based on their ethnicity is not racist. That's literally
so
the
so
definition of racist.
of course, but what I would tell you is prejudice exists. The question is, what do you do with your prejudice? So when they saw that she was a wonderful person, they let it go. That's the first step. The second step is for this not to exist at all. But what I'm saying is, Rob, you're making this out to be this like 90, like I won't say this percentage. A large proportion of people have this malignant racism about them, and they don't. The majority of your viewers are good people.
I
Like
want
I
I
don't.
want you to I want you to go through the intro prior to when you came on, and I want you to find the part later on and write it in the comments when I said that the majority or a large majority of people are like this. I want you to find that part because I think you heard what you wanted to hear. I
I
think you're
didn't.
doing a lot of what you think you're accusing me of, and I understand that racism has probably played a very big part in your life, as you are saying that you are from a minority background, that your
It has.
parents clearly have, racist leanings about, or they have made race a very big part. So maybe it's a very traumatic trigger. It's a trauma trigger for you, as it has been for me. So we are just 2 people who have a very, very, very nasty relationship with racism. And it's like 2 drunk drivers meeting on a highway. We're not gonna have a good conversation. But thank you for appreciating my basketball takes, and I hope you will continue to after I'm done with this video. All right, cheers, Chris. Have a good one. Okay. Does anyone want to call in, man? Um, and like, I don't know how I feel about that call. This might have been a really bad idea. Anyway, look, I've been on different sides, but I remember dating a girl, and it was literally like her parents did not accept me because I was not her ethnicity. She was Egyptian. You know, I mean, I remember going to a Coptic church which is an Egyptian Coptic church. And you know, for those of you who broad brush racism as it's only like, oh, it's just white people against black people or white people against brown people. It's not. You know, it's pretty multidimensional. I remember going to a Coptic church once, and my friend, who's Egyptian, walked in with his black friend. They stopped the service, bro. They stopped the service. We were all humiliated. This shit is quiet, you know? It used to be really loud, and it's quiet. And now I guess like we get angry when it gets loud again, because we're like, shit. I thought you guys were dead. I thought you guys didn't exist anymore. And it's like, nah, bro. We were just quiet for a bit. Anyway, look, I understand the criticism that this video is probably going to get. Probably going to get a lot of unsubscribes. That's cool. I've learned to follow my heart on this. And like, I know a lot of people probably don't see why the way certain people talk is going to trigger certain people to cover them and cover them differently. But it's just how it is, man. It's just how it is. You know, we have all these baked in subconscious assumptions that based on how someone stands, how they talk, that they must be inherently illiterate, that they must be lazy, that they must be a pothead. You know, sometimes someone will like have a certain way of speaking. It's a little bit like this, and you'll be like, that person is. And we paint these broad brush. And one of the things that Rasheed Wallace said in that interview was he said something really crazy. He's like, everything that they're saying about me is costing me money down the line because people are going to make this assumption about me. And I guarantee you today, if you listen to the coverage of Rasheed Wallace, now I've never like talked to Rasheed Wallace, but I've been in the same room as Rasheed Wallace once, and I saw how he was talking to somebody else, and I just didn't get a chance to say hi, and it wasn't around. And maybe I was just not courageous enough at the time because he was my favorite player. To fight through all those people and interrupt the conversation. But I will never forget like how they covered him. And if you're a fan who listened to that coverage and you met him today, you'd be surprised to know that he's just a giant teddy bear. He's just a lovely family man, loves his kids, loves his wife. He's really nice, really supportive, supports the youth, supports the next generation. He's funny. But you didn't see any of that when he was being covered as a Trailblazer. Because at some point, you know, he's a 6'10" guy with tattoos who smokes weed, who's black. And if you come from a certain, you know, perspective and upbringing, that colors your perspective a lot. And all he has to do is yell at one referee and he's angry black guy forever. DeMarcus Cousins the same way. Big softy. You know, not a hostile guy, never got into a fight, not a bad dude, really funny, you know. But people have this perception of him like he's angry and he's a bad dude and he's scary, and it's like where does this come from? Anyway, thank you, Dave. Yeah, you know, to Chris for calling in, I'm sorry I got angry at you. You're certainly entitled to your own opinion. You know, your experiences are different than my experiences, obviously. But I reject the notion that I'm trying to make this a bigger deal than it is, or, you know, it is a big deal. It's talked about constantly in private. It is consistently addressed, and you know, it's present across the world. I mean, you know, you might be surprised to find out that this is present in, you know, how Eastern Europeans treat gypsies. That's racism. You know, you might be surprised to find out this is how, you know, the Indian caste system works, the untouchables. It's all over the world. It's not just a black and white problem. It's an everywhere problem. And it's like the more we subconsciously assume so much about people based on our upbringing, based on something as trivial as the color of their skin. I mean, God, like the subconscious bias towards light skin is such a prevailing issue in Asia. Like look at skin lightening cream in Asia, all Asian countries, India, Thailand, Malaysia, so many countries. It's billions of dollars of people just trying to, apply this shit on their skin to make their skin like 1% lighter. Where does that come from? Why do you think these people are doing that? Why do you think these people are doing that? Because there is a bias. There is a clear bias and a privilege and a courtesy extended to people who, have lighter skin. So, it's kind of all over the place. Yeah. Anyway, I will end this before I get myself canceled, probably. I don't know. But thank you, 79, 80 people for checking this out. I will remind you of a story that happened around the pandemic, and I was on the subway for the first time in what felt like 3 months with my girlfriend at the time, and we were just everything was quiet, and this elderly white couple came on, and they started yelling at this very quiet young Asian lady, and she just had her headphones on. And I kept looking at them, screaming at her from the other side of the train. And I'm just listening to them just rail off on her, saying, you're the reason for all of this. Blah, blah, blah. This happened to my daughter. Why don't you go back? You guys are dirty. And I'm just like, these people look pretty dangerous. They look pretty unhinged if they're saying this to a person. And I was like, I don't care. And I'm looking around at everyone like who's a lot closer to this than I am. There's like 50 people just kind of like, nope, 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 not happening. Nope, it's not happening. If I just ignore it, it'll go away. It will not. These people would not shut up. So I went probably about 50 meters, 50 to 60 meters away. This was happening. And I screamed the shit out of them. Screamed them. Told them to get the fuck off the train. Told them to go fuck off. They started screaming at me. They started all sorts of shit at me. And then I looked over at that lady and I put my arm on her shoulder and I said, "Are you okay?" And she looked unfazed, bro. Unfazed. I would be less heartbroken if she was crying her eyes out. So I went and sat back down. And I thought about why she was unfazed. Would you be unfazed? I wouldn't be unfazed. I think that shit would hurt. People telling you to go back to your own country. I think that would hurt. And I thought about that woman and the blank look of absolute, this didn't fucking do anything to me. And I'm pissed. I'm screaming. I'm shaking. She's not. She's stoic. Like someone had just asked her if she wanted bubblegum. Nothing. And I kept thinking about this woman. And the only thought I had in my mind was, how many times has someone said this to her in the last month that it no longer even phases her? My request to you, Pensar basketball community, my request to you, if you watch this afterwards, if you got to the 58-minute mark of this very long video, which, a lot of people are going to ignore because they're going to say this has nothing to do with basketball and I'm not listening to this guy about his takes on social issues. I get it. But if you've made it this far, to the 84 of you, the next time you see somebody doing something like this, next time you see someone harassing someone like this, online, offline, in person, please say something. Do something. It may not stop it. It may get you yelled at. But I guarantee you that the person that you do it for, deep down, they will go home slightly more at peace that someone else saw what they saw and that they mattered. I think it's really important. Peace, guys. Have a good one.